Hi everyone, it's Katie and welcome back to another video. Today I have a much requested review of the Flowers of Love card deck that I have, and I've shared this occasionally on the channel, but I've never really spoken too much about it. I suppose because it's an older deck. I got it given to me as a gift from my mum quite a while ago, and I don't really hear much about it online. It is by Lo Scarabeo. I don't think they even call it an oracle deck, but that's what I would call it. And it's adorable. It's one of those decks that, you know, if you were to ask me what my favorite oracle deck is, this wouldn't even come to mind, but it would be one of my most used, and it is one that I just really enjoy using. So it comes in this like oversized tuck box, I suppose. It has this beautiful cover with this giant sunflower on the front, which is in fact the reason Mum picked it out for me. She found it at a secondhand like op shop in Perth. She likes to get me little gifts while she's away, often comes back with decks, which lucky me. And she got this one because of the sunflower. Sunflowers are my favorite flower, always have been. So a giant sunflower on the front of a little oracle deck, yes please. And it says on the back that this is a practical guide for romantic situations and a flower for every circumstance of love. So this is really designed basically for relationships. This deck is actually set up very interestingly, and we'll talk about that again soon, but it is very centered on love and relationships, although that isn't how you have to use it. So when you open up the box, you have this little book, which is like a good size. There's quite a lot of information in here. And the book provides you with quite a bit of information for each card. So each provides you with the language of flowers, so all of the kind of meanings attributed to the flower. Then it provides the legend, so the fable or myth that the creators have associated with this flower in this card. Then they also provide the divinatory meaning and the times of realization. So this is kind of days or months that you might want to use for timing in your readings if you do that sort of kind of reading. And then it also provides the flowers advice. And then what's really cool is that they also kind of walk through what the card would mean in different positions of the spreads that they've provided, which I think is really useful. Whether or not you use the spreads in the back, it gives you a good idea of, you know, what each card can mean in different positions and when you look at it in different ways. So you do essentially get like a full page, even a bit more, of information on each and every card. And we have a few spreads in the back as well. Interestingly, the deck also includes 6 what I might call suits. They just describe them as groups. And these are the flowers of waiting. The second group is flowers of indifference. The third, flowers of passion. The fourth, flowers of jealousy. The fifth, flowers of declared love. And the sixth, flowers of faithful love. So there's actually quite a bit of a system going on here. There's a lot of information in the guidebook, perhaps more than you might expect. And as I said, there's quite a bit of structure within this card deck. Now, I don't know if the packaging for this deck has changed over the years, but for mine, I also have the cards themselves in another little tuck box, which is nice. So they don't kind of rattle around in the larger one. It is basically just a mini version of the larger one. So this is the 36 card deck, and the cards, as I said, they're a bit smaller, kind of more of a playing card size, I suppose. I don't really have any playing cards to compare to, but compared to a regular Rider-Waite-Smith or something, they are quite a bit smaller. I really like the cardstock. They're not too thick, but not too thin. They don't feel flimsy. Kind of got that smooth, not so plasticky finish, but it's quite smooth. And they're just really easy to shuffle. The backing is very pretty, very simple, and it is reversible if that's something you're interested in, although it doesn't discuss reversals at all in the guidebook. The colors on these are really bright and beautiful. I really, really enjoy the color palette. And as you can see, the borders and the titles, these indicate which kind of family or group or suit, I suppose, the flower is from, or the card is from. And obviously you can see here that we have the number of the card listed on the card at the top, as well as the name of the flower. And then we also have kind of like a keyword or the key message of the card. So because of all of that, and we do have like a bit of a scene going on, like it's not just a picture of a flower. You kind of see in the card people or characters from these fables, myths and fairy tales. You can see them in the card. So you have the guidebook to help you, but if you're more of an intuitive reader and you just want to work with the images, there's plenty to go on from the cards alone. One thing I will say though that I've noticed, that the myth or fable, the story that they provide, a lot of the time I don't always feel like it connects 100% with the keyword that they've provided. Like it feels relevant, but it doesn't always feel like it's the moral of the story. Like it sometimes feels almost like it contradicts the moral of the story, the keyword. So that's the one thing I get caught up on this deck, that I often feel like, you know, what they've provided in the guidebook, the conclusion that they come to for the card feels a little bit disjointed to me sometimes. So that is why very often how I use this deck, either I use it without the guidebook, just read it intuitively with the image that I have, the name of the flower and the keyword, or if I am going to use the guidebook, and I very often do because I think there's a lot of really cool information in here and I like reading the little stories, instead what I will do is read through the myth and I will draw my own conclusions just from the story. So that's kind of how I like to use the book. Reading through and just enjoying this little kind of snippet of a story, a summary, boiled down of a story from wherever, a different culture, and just kind of taking my message as what I interpret to be the moral of the story, or if a certain word or phrase jumps out to me. So I enjoy using this deck in different ways, and I do. Every time I use it will be slightly different, which kind of keeps things fresh, keeps things a bit fun. I think it also means that this deck is quite versatile for me. I can whip out a few cards and just draw a message quite intuitively and quickly, or I get to really kind of draw out a whole reading, and I very often use this deck in conjunction with others, especially the Gill Tarot. So I'll end up having, you know, 5 spread positions with each with a Gill Tarot card and a Flowers of Love card, and so there's a lot of depth to work through. And often when I'm doing that, I'm using more than one deck. I'm really taking the time to sit with and get to the bottom of a deeper message that, you know, those combination of cards can provide. And so in that circumstance I would very often use the guidebook, and in those cases I really enjoy seeing how the myth kind of, I notice bits and pieces, whether it's just a color or a shape. As I'm reading through the myth, I often notice little hints of it in the Gill Tarot card. So that's how I find that this deck, it works really beautifully alongside the Gill Tarot. And I think it kind of, because it's quite simple, quite versatile, not a lot going on, but it's still structured and has enough going on, I think it can be paired with a lot of decks, a lot of tarot decks very easily. So I thought now I would briefly walk you through all of the cards as well as these 6 groups we've been talking about. So obviously with 36 cards and 6 groups, we have 6 cards in each group, and they are color coded. The first suit runs 1 to 6, second 7 to 12, so it's pretty easy to, you know, work out which if you forget, but they are of course color coded as well. So the guidebook talks about how each of these groups is kind of related to different situations involved in love or relationships, and some of these are more positive situations while others depict less positive situations. So our first group are the Flowers of Waiting, and the guidebook says that the key symbol is the bud. The second group are the Flowers of Indifference, and the symbol here is the drooping flower. The third group are Flowers of Passion, with the symbol being flower in bloom seen from the front. The fourth group are Flowers of Jealousy, and here we have a symbol of 3 flowers. The fifth group are Flowers of Declared Love, and the symbol here is profile of flower, or the profile of the flower. And the sixth group, these are Flowers of Faithful Love, and the symbol is 2 budded flowers. So let's have a bit of a look at the cards in each of these suits now. So our first card is Wisteria, and the keyword is romantic expectation. And I think it's so pretty. I love this deck. I love how we have the flowers kind of right in the foreground, and then behind them we have kind of a bit of a scene with a woman shepherdess with her goats. And then I just love the depth of the card, how we have like that mountain and the alpine forest kind of like in the background. And the guidebook does discuss the legend of a shepherdess in Italy and how she was good and kind but suffered greatly because she was so ugly. And she was waiting for a miracle that never happened, but finally the gods of the mountain, moved by her pain, turned her into the delicate flower that bears her name, Wisteria. And although the key word is romantic expectation, some of the meanings that are provided are tender friendship, patient waiting for love, sweet fantasies, expectations, an exciting meeting, an introduction that makes you dream, sensuality still to flower, gratitude, a kind, tender, and patient person. And then our times of realization are Wednesday, May, and June, which is cool because then if you're talking about, you know, short-term timing, you have the day of the week. If you're talking about more like long, medium-term timing, we have the months too. And then our piece of advice is to wait without putting on pressure for a sign from the other.
Interest is undeniable, but the time isn't right yet. And then, of course, as I discussed, it does provide interpretations for different spread positions that this card might come up in for 2 of the spreads that are provided in this guidebook. So I'll just give a really quick example just for this card. If this card were to come up in the Discover Your Partner spread in position 1, which is Who Loves Me, and the answer might be a tender and patient person who follows their heart rather than their head, a dreamer and instigator of dreams, but lacking firmness and has a tendency to be vague. And instead, if it came up in position 2, which is How much am I loved? And the answer might be that they are in love with the idea of love more than they're in love with you, and they're wrapped up in a fantasy. There is a taste for the sweetness of waiting, knowing that reality is always inferior to expectations. Whereas position 3, Why am I loved? It might mean because you are sweet, patient, and tender, and you make their heart beat faster without instigating violent emotions. And then it goes on like this. So obviously it kind of sticks with the core meaning of the card, but just kind of lets you know how you might interpret this card in different positions. And, you know, as I said, we have 2 different spreads, all different types of positions. So you really get a well-rounded idea of what this card could mean. So even if you don't end up using these spreads, I think it's really cool that you get different perspectives on the same card. So I won't go through the details of every card, but that's to give you an idea of the information that you get in the guidebook and the sort of perspective this deck is having. And it is very, very pretty. Snowdrop, New Hope. We have like an angel here. Lilac, Unexpected Emotion. We have Pan with his panpipes. Really love this one, Innocent Love. It's so pretty. Hyacinth, The Game of Seduction. And 6, Chrysanthemum, Loving Strategy. So this first group was the Flowers of Waiting, if I didn't say that. Group number 2 are the Flowers of Indifference. And we have Hawthorn here with Sentimental Prudence. This is really cool. We have like a character with 2 faces. And obviously the guidebook will go into this scene and what's going on. Calendula, Disappointment in Love. We have Superficial Interests. And I think you can work out who this is. Falling in love with their own reflection. Water Lily, Impossible Dreams. Just love this bright burst of colour. Poppy, Loneliness Suffered. And Lavender, Denied Passion. Next we have the Flowers of Passion. And we have the Rose, Eternal Passion. Jasmine, Sweet Sensuality. The Orchid, Unbridled Eroticism. Iris, Satisfied Desire. You have Loving Rivalry and Fleeting Passion. Our 4th group is the Flowers of Jealousy. So obviously this is a little bit more of the shadow sides of relationship. We start with Internal Conflict, Deceptive Promise, Unjustified Suspicions, Silent Revenge, Forbidden Thrills, and Guilty Relationships. So I think there's a lot you can do with cards like this. You can get really quite specific with what's going on, which is cool and very interesting. Our 5th and second to last group are the Flowers of Declared Love, and our first card in this group is Declared Love, the Tulip. Lily of the Valley is Happiness Rediscovered. Kind of reminds me of the 3 of Cups. A Preference Expressed. Perfect Love. A Gift of Love. I think it's pretty clear what this image is depicting in the background there. A Constructive Relationship. And so that is our 5th. I think they're all so pretty. And our last group, the 6th group, are the Flowers of Faithful Love. And then just really pretty. I really enjoy this deck. Simple, but just really effective. And as I've said before, you know, there's just like quite a bit going on in this deck in terms of structure, even in terms of what's going on in the cards. So there's really quite a lot you can do with it. I think it's a really unassuming deck and a surprisingly, almost deceptively complex deck almost, I would say. Not overly so, but there is quite a bit going on, which I think is really cool. So this isn't going to be a long video. It's a pretty simple deck. There's only 36 cards, but it is really pretty. And I've really enjoyed working with it. It's a bit of a staple in my collection. As I said, it's one of those that, you know, perhaps isn't one that I like love and adore and have to work with and have to have. And so perhaps I wouldn't put it in my, you know, top 5 favorites, but it's just one that's always around, that's always kind of hanging around and that I notice myself going to fairly regularly. Like it's one of those that doesn't sit on my shelf for a year or, you know, for a whole season. But it's also not one that I'm using every day for, you know, however long. It's just one that pops in pretty regularly, pretty frequently, but not too often into my practice and adds its little pop of color, adds its, you know, cute little retelling of a story or a myth with its little message, little moral of the story type message. And I enjoy it. I enjoy my time with it. It adds to my readings without kind of taking over. And it's just a really nice deck to work with and play with. So I hope this has answered any of your questions. I know this is a deck that I talk about fairly regularly, but I haven't really shown and discussed at length. I just kind of mention it in passing quite a lot. So I hope this has answered any questions that you have, but if I've missed anything, please feel free to ask in the comments below. I'll do my best to answer you. And I hope you just enjoyed this video and having a look at this really pretty deck. So until next time, so much love. Bye.